humilitas est veritas. Humility is truth. This is a great Latin saying. Humilitas est veritas. That means when we are truthful, we are automatically humble. And in our daily lives, what does that mean is we need to be truthful to ourselves, we need to be truthful to our neighbor, and we need to live in truth and experience truth in our daily lives. That's why the first reading taken from the book of Sirach invites us, my child, perform your task with humility, and people who are loved by God will accept you, or people will love you whom God accepts. And then greater you are, more humble you should be, because you will find favor with God. There are people with lofty and renowned ideas and ideals, but God reveals His secret to the humble. What a wonderful first reading. If you go deeper into the sense of the first reading difference, we will understand that we need to fear God. It is not a servile fear, but it is a respectful fear to God, and then dealing with our neighbor with that kind of truthfulness. And that's why when we think about today's first reading, which is directly connected with the third reading, the gospel passage from Luke's gospel, we find here Jesus was invited by a rich Pharisee who was perhaps the leader of the Pharisees to his home for a meal. And when Jesus goes there, the Pharisees and scribes were keenly watching Jesus. Why they were watching Jesus? It normally happens in our society too. It has happened also to me. Now you go for a celebration with your clergy collar, people will watch you, what you eat, what you drink, how much you eat, how much you drink, with whom you talk, young ladies or old ladies, young men or old men, how long you talk with a person, everything is observed. In the same way, it has happened to Jesus. They were watching Jesus. Why? They wanted to catch Jesus. They wanted to in some way scrutinize Jesus. They wanted to know more about Jesus. What kind of a person is this? He is teaching and preaching and he is well known, he is working miracles, he is a prophet, and therefore we need to try to scrutinize. And that's why it happens in our daily lives, dear friends. When you hold a kind of position, whether it is in the family or in the society or in the community, people always watch you. Whenever you are in a position, people try to scrutinize you, to find out how you are dealing with people and situations. The same thing happened in the life of Jesus. But Jesus was also super intelligent. He was not a guy who would sit in a corner. He was observing people. And when he observed, he found something extraordinary. And people were choosing the first places in that banquet or in that place of celebration. And then he gives a very clear, concrete, down-to-earth teaching to the people. Whenever you are invited, do not go and choose the first places. Because when you choose the first places, there would be other people who are invited. And the host comes and tells you, friend, this is not for you. You have to leave this place and go to the last place, and you will be having that humble experience. But when you choose the least place and the host comes and tells you, go up higher, that is meant for you, you will be honored in the presence of people. Dear friends, when we look at this first reading and compare it to the third reading, we find in our lives one particular aspect, that is, whatever we have received from God, it is a gift. Whatever we have, whether we are our appearance, our talents, our resources. Sometimes we may say that, oh, I got it from my father, from my grandfather, but everything comes from God. And that's why recognizing the gifts that come to us as coming from God and having that great respect for God in our daily lives. Now the second most important thing that we have to keep in mind, in our lives there may be moments where we think that we are the most intelligent people, talented people with honor, degrees, name and fame. But when we get to the facts of our daily lives, we must always be humble. And why need to be humble? I will give you some examples. Dear friends, who are we? And what are we? And what is our planet compared to the whole of the universe? Now, the scientific statistics tells us that there are more than 10 trillion planetary systems. I do not know how to write a trillion. I know how to write a billion and a million. 10 trillion planetary systems. And in these 10 trillion planetary systems, we can find the earth is like a tiny, insignificant, invisible dot. That's it. Then who are we? To boast about ourselves. Sometimes we say, oh, I'm in America, I'm in Canada. Nothing compared to the universe. Whether it is America or Canada or India, nothing compared to the universe. Well, that is one fact. Another thing, we get that sunshine, sun. Do you know how big is the sun? The statistics are staggering. The diameter of the sun is 1,392,000 kilometers. Diameter, you understand what is diameter? And the diameter of the earth is just 12,756 kilometers. Very precise. 12,756 kilometers. And now someone would ask, how many earths can be put into the sun? That is another thing. 330,000 earths can be fitted into the belly of the sun. Now just imagine, dear friends, how big is the universe God created. And the distance between the sun and the earth is 149.9 million kilometers. Now we are tiny, insignificant with regard to our existence on the planet, and creature-wise we are so small. And that's why God has created us. The wise man says, my child, perform your task with humility and you will be loved by those whom God accepts. We are all sons and daughters of God. When we accept that fact that God has created us in this mighty universe and He has given us this privilege of being sons and daughters of God. That's why St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas have long teachings about humility. And St. Augustine says the whole of Christian teaching is about humility. Why? It comes from Jesus, who said, learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. And then Jesus said, unless you become like little children, you will never enter into God's kingdom. Invitation to be humble and simple and meek in our daily lives. Dear friends, when we think about humility, concretely what does that mean? Saint Gregory the Great says, humility comes from the Latin word humus, mud. And what is that mud? Always trampled underfoot. We walk on the mud, we till the ground, we sow the seed, and sometimes we throw many things on the ground. It could be paint or water or dirt or acid, whatever. And what does the mud do? It absorbs. Humus is that. That's why humility in our daily lives is what? Wherever we go, we should be able to adjust ourselves to the situations and to people. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who will be canonized today as Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who said, Humility does not mean that you sit in a corner and say, I am not able to do anything, I am small and so on. No. Humility is practicing the values of Christ with a hook. That means we throw a hook in the water for fishing. Practicing humility is with a hook of the teaching of Christ, that is truth. Looking at the life of Christ. That's why some practical suggestions for us. Humility means everything that I have comes from God. That is the first thing. And whatever I have received from God is not for myself, it is for sharing. Third, I need to be humble in the presence of other people, not to have that sense of pride and arrogance. I need to be humble, accepting my situation, being truthful to myself, and recognizing the truth in others. Now, recognizing the truth in others means what? I need to accept the other individual as he or she is, truthful, without passing judgment. Very often we have a very serious, terrible weakness, and what is that weakness? We always know to pass judgments on others. Without knowing the person, we have certain preconceived ideas, or we are influenced by certain ideas. And therefore, by looking at a person, I make a judgment already. But Jesus said, do not judge that you may not be judged. Do not judge that you may not be judged. You may not be judged by God. The last part of it is, when we are humble, dear friends, we become really charitable. That is the connection with the gospel. When Jesus says, do not choose places of honor. And last part of the gospel, when you invite for any lunch or dinner, do not invite your brothers or sisters or relatives and rich neighbors, because they are going to repay you. Whereas you invite the crippled, the blind, the lame, and the poor. Literal words of Jesus, because they are not able to repay you. And what is your repayment? Repayment in the resurrection of them. Now, dear friends, can we do that in our daily life in a practical way? Now, for example, you celebrate Christmas, you celebrate Easter, you celebrate your birthday, you celebrate your anniversary. Would you always invite the crippled, the lame, the blind, and the poor? Is it possible? Is it practical? But the sense of it is this, that if you are capable of spending 200 to 300, 400 or 500, sometimes $1,000 or $2,000 for a celebration, keep in mind that there are poor people around you and give something to the poor. That's it. Give something to the poor. If you are capable of spending $500 for a celebration, why can't you spare $5 to a poor person who is in need? Now, there is also an attitude, the attitude of giving. Now, I can give $5 or $1, $2 with that kind of resentment. Someone comes and asks, hey, do you have a change? Do you have a spare coins? Take this and disappear. That would be very rude. Give in a very kind, generous way. Don't make any judgment. Or sometimes when we give money, we say, this guy is going to take drugs. This guy is going to drink. This guy is going to use that money in a useless way. That is not my concern at all. For whom you are giving it, to the person in the name of God, give your generous gift to the person who deserves. And therefore, whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you have done unto me. Wonderful teaching of Christ. Therefore, concluding this reflection, I just want to quote the life of a great personality from Canada, who was the Archbishop of Montreal from 1950 to 1968, Paul-Émile Léger. Have you heard about him? Great personality. Cardinal Léger. He was elevated to cardinalate in the year 1953. Great man, he impressed people. He was an exemplary person, humble, convinced of his vocation, and he made a name not only in the Catholic Church but also in the whole of Canada. But then he was so humble. One day in 1968, April 20th, he wrote his resignation letter, left it in the office. He left his mitre, crosier, pallium, his red garment, disappeared. No one knew where he was. For a long, long period of time, there was investigation to find out about his whereabouts. No one knew where he was. After so many years, a Canadian journalist, when he went to Africa, he found this small, humble guy bent in a small African village, taking care of the crippled, the disabled, and the lepers. And the journalist asked, why? Why did you do it? And his answer was heartening. He said, when 600 million people in the world who enjoy their food, who have all kinds of comforts and amenities of life, on the other side there are more than 3 billion people without food, without medication, and without shelter. I cannot stand this scandal, but I am too old to change all that. But I can do something that satisfies me, and that's why I am very happy in this small village serving the poor and the needy. And he said to the journalist, when you get back to Canada, do not say that you saw Cardinal Leger. You just say to people that a humble, simple priest Leger who is very happy among the poor and the needy. Dear friends, if we can learn from this great cardinal a simple lesson, what is that lesson? In our daily lives, we need to be humble. Look at the universe, look at the humanity, look at all the talented people, mighty people, and ultimately come to that sense of humility, becoming humus in our daily lives. And then out of that must spring the great virtue of charity. That is, whatever God has given me is not for myself, it is for sharing. And when I share, Jesus will say, you will have your reward not in this world, but in the resurrection afterlife. Therefore, the great teaching of Jesus, learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. Kindly rise the prophet.